Just folding my furs.
It reminds me of Venus and Furs for anyone that listens to that kind of music. But anyway, we're here today with peace of mind. While there's thunder and lightning going on in the background. Um, Today we're going to be talking about self-dependency. Um, Self-dependency is a very interesting thing to talk about, and I think two key factors. We spoke about this yesterday. Is the different trees that make self-dependency. And we're going to go over that on today's episode, and I think an important thing to start with is what the difference between the two of us are ideas and understanding of self-dependency. I think that's I need weed, but I think that would be a good thing to start.
Sure, that sounds great. Do you want to go first?
No, no, I gotta light my joint, so while you're talking, I'm gonna be puffing. Productive.
Sure. So for me, I feel like self-dependency, depending on yourself, is like uh, something that comes from either the necessity of having to depend on yourself when there's no one else, or the feeling that you really should learn to depend on yourself just to be a fully self-sufficient human being. I think that it can extend to financial and emotional and mental and vocational and environmental uh, areas. But basically, it's like having like
It's having a guide. It's basically like, for example, when you're playing an instrument, you have this device that counts when every single time you're changing chords. It allows you as a person to have that guide that allows you to kind of pave the way through your life.
But is it a guide though? I feel like people who taught themselves how to be independent, who didn't necessarily have others to lean on. I feel like it's a guide. It's a roadmap that you make for yourself. So it is a guide, but it's not necessarily a guide that was given to you by somebody other than yourself.
The thing is, you're the guide,
Yes. Well, you're creating the guide or
right?
you're creating the roadmap.
Right, correct. For example, like with what I mentioned with the instrument, you could put on that thing that counts how many strumming, you 4, 5, 6, 12, whatever the number is. But
Yes.
you as a person have to, involve yourself in this and understand what you're doing, and then taking it upon yourself. So I agree
Yes.
with you 100%. What I was just referring to is the idea of like you're the guide, the
Like you
Gouda.
are your own guide.
Yes,
You are your own guide. Yeah. It's depending on yourself. It's
of
learning
course.
to take care of yourself. It's learning to nurture yourself and teach yourself and like ask for help when you need to ask for help and support yourself and create the little universe that you exist in, your own little individual universe. And it's kind of understanding that you either have everything that you need or you don't, and you have to figure out what those things are. And it's sort of like, to me, it's less a guide than it is just a presence of mind and awareness that you need to always be. And I feel this very much myself, and I'm somebody who's been, self-dependent since I was a teenager, and partially by necessity and partially because I'm just a very independent human being, but also because I grew up in a very, negative, abusive home, and so like you just kind of end up relying on yourself and creating your own roadmap because the roadmaps that you've been given are all very tainted.
It's a
And so
good
it's
it's a
trust,
good point.
it's having an awareness of what you need or what you think you might need or what you don't have.
Right. No, it's like I said, it's a great point. I think something to keep in mind is not all of us grow up in healthy environments. Um, some of us grow up in environments that can be quite toxic. And to learn self dependency depends on sometimes of where you grew up. Some people grow up with parents that really strive for that message. With my parents and all of their problems and issues that I had, one thing I can say is my dad's ideology of self dependency. My dad was a very big believer of it. He was very against college. He was a very strong believer of you make your own. He's like, why work for somebody? Work for yourself. That was my father's like constant intention in your way of thinking, and it took me a while to understand it and really to visualize it, and I understand where he was coming from. My father came here as an immigrant from another country, and when he came here, he had to learn to survive in this country, and that's a thing also which is important is self-reliance. Relying
Yes,
on yourself, knowing that, fuck, I'm here now. What do I do? What do I do now? Like, what am I
totally,
going to do?
totally, totally. I grew up in an environment that was where I didn't really feel like I could trust the adults around me. I didn't really feel like they were adults a lot of the time. I didn't feel like they had control over the situations that we were living in, or the finances, or the emotional states of the others, or the of themselves. And so from a young age, I kind of learned to just be very, very much like live in my own world, and also understand and figure out what I needed to survive and what I needed to get by with that, while doing as much as I could, but also not sticking out so much that I would cause undue attention to myself. And like so I learned how to be very self-sufficient at an early age. And my partner is kind of similar as well. Their situation was even more so just needing to rely entirely on yourself um, than mine was. But like I think yeah, and there is a definitely there's lots of other experiences other than that. Like not everybody had to be an adult since they were
So
children.
you
Many
mentioned
people got to actually be children, and
you
then it's
you
something
you,
they
you
have to learn when they're older.
so you mentioned with your partner, which if you
Hmm.
don't mind, we can kind of his name is Saturn. He might
Their name, their
their name,
name,
sorry.
their name.
Um, they
Yeah,
might
let go.
be they might be here on the podcast one of these days. But what I'm really curious is you've mentioned this to me before.
Hmm.
You and Saturn have different upbringings and different backgrounds. We mentioned this yesterday, where you said that your self dependency, your understanding is very similar on both levels, but you have a different experience when it comes to it. Uh,
Yes,
you want to elaborate a little bit more on that? I'm actually kind of curious.
definitely. Absolutely. Well, so my experience was my parents were both close to 40 when they had me. They were old freaks, old hippie weirdos who met in an AA meeting. My mother had been sober 8 years. My father had been sober two. They hooked up, and 9 months later, I was born. They didn't particularly like each other, and the entire time was very fraught. And they did manage to stay together in some hobbled way for like a little over, like almost a decade and a half. Well, 13 years. 12 or 13 years, but like it was inconsistent. We moved 14 times before I was 9 years old, and including both coasts of the country. And there was no, like, when people think of like a childhood home, like we didn't have one. I had so many different ones. We had continually had different cars that were just, they'd get a car, couldn't afford it, repossessed, get an apartment, couldn't afford it, move. Like it was just that kind of constant thing. And then like, my mother was very much, she was very much sifting through her own trauma, because she was born to people that were like the dying, like the last generation of like raging Irish Catholic alcoholics of like the south side of Chicago, where they're like successful on the outside, and then on the inside they're just like heinously abusive to their children. So she was like going through her own traumas, but in that was not able to disengage from that. And so she was an extremely abusive parent. She's been dead for like about 9 years. And my father was just pretty absent. When he was there, he was actually quite a good father, but he just didn't really want to be a father when he had me. He already had one son who was 11 years older than me, and he wanted to focus on him and like trying to be as present a person in his life. And then my mom got pregnant, and like kind of bullied him into becoming a family. And so he's a good dude. So he was just like, yes, let's do this. And they tried, and it was not successful. But there were so many pitfalls. It was constantly like, constant fighting, constant breaking up, constant this, that. But then, not breaking up really, but like kicking
Right.
each other, like just like out of the house, like some physical
But
violence, a lot
they
of emotional and
but they
verbal.
basically but they
But it was,
basic
yeah,
they basically just came together because there was a common understanding
yeah,
of you. Uh, and again, I think
decency, yeah,
I think it's a really I think it's a really important piece when we talk about self dependency, right? Because it all comes back to the parents. Now, again,
yeah,
no one should use parents as an excuse to being a drunken alcoholic in the future. You could, your trauma is not your trauma as a child, it is not permanent. You can always get that taken
no,
care of later on. But anyway, going back to this is where you're basically saying you're being raised in this environment of constant moving, constant changing. This tension
yeah,
between the two of
constant
them.
flux. And so, yeah, yeah. So I was, I started writing stories and creating little stories very young. And so my center of stability was really from myself from an early age, and creating the worlds in my mind and writing the characters that I came up with, and creating these really long narratives. Like I wrote my first like full novel at 13 years old. And then, when I was just 15, the year that 9/11 happened, I was 14. I met my first partner at 15. We were together for like 3.5 years. He's still one of my dearest friends, but that gave me a sense of autonomy. And I was pretty much acting as like an adult, or at least a college student level of just autonomy from about 15 years old on. And I also, I was working from 16 on, and I've never really stopped. I'm 36 in a week. And like, I've just kind of, and I had, I lived at home for longer. Like I lived at home to like, 19 or so, but like that was just because we were broke, and it didn't make sense. I didn't even make enough at the time to be able to get housing outside.
So you
So like,
feel
but yeah,
so I'm just like from like what I'm hearing, and again, the two of us we have completely different backgrounds. But
yeah,
from what I'm hearing is you've had to basically been, and this is the thing we have in common, where you've had to be an adult. You never were
yes.
I never was a child either. I was always being an adult when it came around my parents.
I was a child with my friends, but then when I was at home,
Right.
I knew that I couldn't really go to anyone with a problem. Like
Right.
I knew that I
Exactly.
had like
Yeah.
unless it was something that I would like if it was something that I would get in more trouble with if I didn't tell it, then I would tell it. I would do that. But like for example, like my mother, like she kicked me out of the house multiple times when I was a teenager as well. And so when it was just the two of us. My dad had left. She found my diary at one point and read it. Like first of all, huge violation. Like you should not read your children's diaries. Like, but she read it, and then she like held me in like this like like almost like in court, and just like spent several hours berating me for what the contents were. And I was a adventurous little child, and then kicked me out of the house. And that was her solution. And like that was 13 years old. So like I had, I had, around that same time I attempted suicide at one point. Like I realized that if I wanted to have the life I wanted to have, I just kind of had to like figure it out. And I knew
Right.
there were people that I resonated with because I was very into like MTV and like subculture concepts and things, and just in movies. And I was like, these are the people I need to be with. People that are making these films, or these people who are singing these songs or making these music videos. I need to find the people that are like this. And so I had this idea of like, there are more of me out there. I have to find them. But it also made me like very, very self-sufficient. Like
So
just I have my everything planned. I know where all the exits are in every room,
when we're
that kind of thing.
when we're talking about childhood, getting back to Saturn, so
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yes.
you having your childhood, and I mean, they're not here. So I don't
No,
know
but they're, yeah.
exactly what their
Mhm.
childhood is. But from your perspective,
I can get into it a little bit.
what is the difference between the two of yours? I can't speak English, but uh, your childhood. What were the main
Well,
differences?
I'll try to be a little bit vague because I want them to be able to say their own piece with it, but I'll just kind of summarize it a little bit. But they were born as an accident to a mother. Never knew their father, was raised by their grandparents. Grandmother was very abusive. Grandfather was kind of great, but he was military and he was gone a lot of the time. And Saturn was diagnosed type 1 diabetic at like 6 years old, and that was very challenging because people just didn't know as much about that like 30 years ago. And then like basically was at 13 was kicked out and made a ward of the state, and has been on their own since they were 13, and just figuring it out since then. Not like, and like for me on an emotional and like psychological level, I was on my own, like where I had to create my own little reality because I had an abusive upbringing, but I had a family. Like the last member of my mother's side died last year, and she was a really lovely one. But like, I don't have family currently, really, like biologically, other than my partner. But I do have, or like not that I'm like connected to, but Saturn just suddenly had no one. Like it's a different thing. So there's self-reliance in a different way when you are literally just on your own from the time that you're 13 years old.
So it's interesting because talking about this, I mean, with your childhood and their childhood, I mean, even with mine, I had loving parents. My parents didn't really know how to be parents. They tried their best, but the hardest thing for me was when I finally decided to make myself of my own and leave the community. I gave
Hmm.
up everything. I literally gave up my family. You know, people don't understand this, but when you come out as gay and you come out as not being religious, you like you mentioned, like with Saturn, it's like that's it. There's no one. Like you cut yourself off. Now I
Yeah.
have a little bit of a connection with some people, but there's barely anything. So I mean, it's crazy to say this, but I'm gonna go back to this. I think self dependency starts at a very young age.
Yes, totally. With many. Oh, I think the realization that you need to depend on yourself starts at a young age, for sure. Unless you're like very coddled and so kept like, protected from the world.
Which can sometimes be very damaging for children. Coddling them is
Totally.
a wonderful thing, but at the same time, sorry, we're having a little bit of a
I
little bit of
love the sound of the thunder and
I
lightning
know,
over on your end. I'm like so jealous of it.
but my cat is kind of freaking out, so I'm trying to like
Oh
hold her
no.
and like calm her down, and I'm like, baby, don't worry, you ain't dying today. But only, but
It's
all
okay. Yeah.
yeah, it's all right. But but all serious aside, like all jokes aside, again, I cannot speak English, but anyway, uh,
Oh, good.
it's really hard for children because as great as people try to be parents, remember parents are adults and adults are humans and humans make mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the thing, like at 36, I think about like, because we're not in a place where we're having kids now, but like we plan on it in the next few years, and like that's something that we talk about a lot because we both come from these crazy backgrounds, and I think a lot of people would be like, a lot of people keep even straight up rudely said to us, like, well, like things like, well, with backgrounds like that, why would you want to have kids? And it's like, well, because I want to, because I feel like not everybody needs to, but if you feel like you do feel like it's part of your purpose in this lifetime, like do it. If you don't feel like it,
Not
don't do it.
everybody.
But
No, I
like,
know.
yeah,
Not everybody's cut out for it.
yeah, not everybody needs to. No,
No.
no, not everybody's cut out for it. Not everybody needs to. But if you really feel like it's your calling, absolutely do it. And don't shame anybody if they want to do it, if they have a weird background. Like, like that is called breaking the cycle. That's kind of and that is a sense of, self-dependency as well, as like is there's a lot of talk, I feel like, in our generations of people who are like breaking the cycle, quote unquote, where it's like you were raised in some sort of negative environment, or like some sort of like, like in something that was really terrible, and you're the first person, like, it's sort of like a Daenerys Targaryen or whatever, like where it's
Mm-hmm.
like you're in the early episode, the early seasons of Game of Thrones, where you're like breaking the wheel, so to speak, where you're like I'm going to write this new story. And it's like that's what we're all, I think, trying to do now, is just write our own story and not continue the toxic narrative that we might have been born into.
I think. Oh my god, this podcast is gonna be amazing. Just letting you know,
It's
this is
so cool.
real.
Yeah.
This is real. This is not like special effects.
It is.
Uh,
I'm so
but
jealous because it's nice and cool in LA. At least today, it's not hot as balls, but it is like not raining like that, and I'm jealous.
um, but oh god, I lost track. No, blah. What I was trying to say was, I think that when we when we all strive, especially now more than ever, like we're able to reach more people than ever before. I mean, we could literally spew our diaries all over TikTok, and millions and millions and millions of people might click on it.
TikTok has changed lives.
I think
It really has.
I think also, like, being a dependent person means to have, a give no fuck, take no shit attitude, kind of.
Yeah, that's why it's one of the tenets in the Burning Man culture. It's radical self-reliance, right? It's like one of the principles is literally like relying on yourself and not expecting anybody to come and save you, basically.
Nobody should be saving you, because the way, the path to isolation starts with expecting people to be there for you. The second you start to, rely on people being there for you, you're fucked.
But at the same time, I think no one should you should never expect someone to come and save you, but you should always want to go help others.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not all the time 100%, obviously, because we have to have our
Mm-hmm.
own lives, but
Yeah.
like I feel like you should never have that expectation from anyone else. But this is how I live my life. Like, I don't ever expect anyone else to help me, save me, anything like that. But I do always want to be a resource that other people can come to if they need help. And I make that very clear in all of my friendships and relationships. And I try not to spread myself too thin, but I have my shit together. I have spent a lifetime figuring it out and making it work right, like making my little motor run right, and like my whole little system work right. And I want to help those who have had similar backgrounds to myself, and who have had similar struggles, because I think that part of being human and part of really understanding, you know, for me, the meaning of life is just learning how we can help each other and make the world better for everybody
I
in the
think
process.
I think it's I kind of believe in this philosophy. Trauma, suffering, stress, depression. It's what makes us better people. And
100%.
and it's like the thing that all the pharmaceutical companies do not want you to hear. And it's like the fact of life. Being depressed literally means there's something that you're not doing right. Something that your body needs, you're not giving it. And you just can't put the pieces together. I've known people that have done like psychedelics that were super depressed. And then bam, like something just clicked in their brain, like, "Oh, quit a
I'm a
job."
big believer of psychedelic psychedelics as medicine, 100%. But I also do understand, and as I've gotten older, like when I was in my teens and 20s, I was definitely like, oh, you can just fix it with diet and exercise and everything else. And as I've gotten older, I've been like, you can't fix everything with that though. Like sometimes you need both.
Of
Yes, there's an
course.
element of the external and changing the external, but sometimes it really is just your brain chemistry. And I think that things are definitely overprescribed, but I do think, and this comes back to self-dependence as well. But like, I think that things are definitely overprescribed, but I also think that like, for me, it was more accepting that like people need, like I take, well, I just have ADHD medication, but I have, close people who are on antidepressants and things as well. And like, it's changed their lives. And I think that sometimes it's what you're doing. And sometimes it really is just you have weird, your brain chemistry is just
So,
different,
it
neurodivergency, and so sometimes
right.
it does both. I think it's both.
You're correct. What I think is also important. Not everything works for everyone. I'm not saying that you pop
Yes.
a pill or take a mushroom. That's not how you fix things. All I'm trying to say is a lot of issues that we struggle with are, again, that indication of being dependent, meaning a person that's open-minded, a person that has control of their financial situation, a person that has control of their life goals. Again, not everything is in our control. Sometimes things go out of hand, but we have somewhat of a structure of what we're doing. We're not just sitting around and doing nothing and complaining how we get nothing. You can't just
Right.
sit around and do nothing and expect the world to come. It's just, no.
No, you have to make the waves yourself. You have to like, you have to, if you're constantly sitting on the sidelines and you're like, why isn't anything coming to me? Then you're going to be unhappy your entire life. But if you get in there and you start to swim around and you're like, you start to meet other people and you start to have different experiences, you start to expand your horizons and like, open up to new things and connect to different people and find those right avenues of people, of friends, of work, of creativity, of art, whatever you're looking for. But you have to be willing to do that. And that's part of self-reliance as well, is knowing that it's not going to come to you. You have to actually do it.
And I said this before, communities don't make individuals. Individuals make communities.
Yes.
And it's simple as that.
Well, how do you feel like, so the upbringing that you grew up with, how do you feel like, do you feel like you were able to draw on any lessons that you learned in terms of how you view the world and your tenacity in taking on new experiences and like life paths?
So for me, I mean, we spoke about this before. When I left, I turned to three different avenues. Um, I started looking into being more open-mindedness. Uh, Three musical people that I connected really well with, which was David Bowie, Freddie Mercury, and John Lennon. And then lastly was Buddhism. Um, the big issue for me is I grew up in an environment that was very, very controlling. So, hold on a second. So because it was very controlling, you weren't really allowed to think. God does the thinking for you. That was the, from my experience, that was my teaching. Um, so I really had to create my own way of understanding and solving things because it was hard, because I was raised in an environment. Oh, I don't have this. Oh, pray to God, pray to God. Say like this and this and this and this, and don't worry, God will give it to you. Like that. That's the kind of crap I grew up with. Um, I think the biggest struggle that I would say for myself was finding that connection. You kind of spend time with the wrong kind of, oh God, I've spent the wrong kind of time with a lot of people. Like the type of people that only wanted to hang out with me because of my sexuality. And I didn't really understand, and then those people went away, and then I went, and then I dealt with these other crazy psychos, and It's been six. I would say been 6 years. Me now, the person that you're hearing talk right now, has only existed for about 6 years. This is me from the ground up. That this person, there was no, I was not like, there was no point of my life I was like this until about 6 years ago. Which seems like very little to you because you've had a longer life experience than I have. But for me, like I'm 23, but I've only lived 6 years of my life out of those 23 years.
I understand that. I do. I mean, like on like same but different kind of level. But I understand it in a different sense of, but like I think where I can relate to that is when you are in survival mode a lot of your life, like oh, so much of your life is spent trying to just find solid ground to move from, to expand from, like because usually people have some of the things, right? They have like a home or a family or some kind of financial support or like, like people who like there's like some factors of things, right? But like when you're kind of literally just like shoved out, you have to figure it out. And so a lot of it is just feeling like, okay, who is my community? Where am I supposed to live? What am I supposed to do with my life? How am I supposed to make money and support myself? Who am I supposed to be partners with? All these different things where you're just like, what am I like, and what is, what on a like spiritual and creative level, what am I supposed to do with my life? Creative, like through my art, through my acts of service, through my actions. And like, so there's so much that's just running. You're like on autopilot. And so then when you're finally able to like stop and you're like, oh, I actually, where I am is actually pretty good. Like that is kind of similar to, I think I can resonate with it on that level where it's like, once you are no longer like on autopilot of trying to do whatever the thing is, like, or trying to like obey or trying to like follow, whatever your thing that's keeping you on that track is, once you step off, it is like you're kind of like renewed or reborn
Yeah.
because you're finally able to be autonomous and separate from the things that got you there.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, I don't know if applies to everyone, but the people that I've met that left the community, like I did, I don't like those people. A lot of them are still on autopilot, and a lot of them they're really fucked in the head. Like, you say the wrong thing, you do like, their brains are just on, like, 100, like, it's just crazy. And there are people that I relate with very well that have no understanding of what I was raised with, and I have great relationships with. However, this doesn't necessarily apply to everyone. There are people that, like, you grew up in an environment, they grew up in the same environment as you did, and then you have that great click. But again, remember, also adaptability is an important thing about dependency. You can't be dependent if you don't learn how to adapt. Like, you were telling me, like, you were
100%.
like jumping from house to house. Like, you got to adapt to each situation. Like, oh my god, no.
Yeah,
Ah.
you have to learn how to go everywhere and talk to everybody and adjust to every environment that you're in. I have people like I hang out with people sometimes and they'll see me go from one environment to another environment to another environment and just kind of like switch from thing to thing to thing and just be able to talk to anybody on like a very genuine, like, one to one kind of way. And they're like, how do you do that? It's just like, well, because I have to. Like, there's no one else. Like, if I thought, like, I helped a lot of people myself. Like, I helped bring a lot of other people up. And I've had a little bit of help from some friends and stuff along the way in terms of just like, help teaching me how to like apply for a credit card, for example, or like drive as an adult because no one ever taught me when I was young and I just biked everywhere. Like, like things like that. And like, no one wants to teach you if they don't think that you're going to be able to pay for their car if you crash it. But like things like it's true. It's really, you have no idea how hard it is to learn how to drive as an adult with no money. It's insane. But like now I have two cars. Now I have a car and I have a truck and I'm it's like, yeah, I did this. But that's a completely different story. I appreciate everybody who has helped me, but at the same time, it's something where it's like, if you fall, no one's going to catch you. So you have to adapt, 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 adapt. And sometimes that means you're never actually able to pause for long enough to process what's gone on. But at the same time, it also, and that happens later, and so you sort of have a delayed response in terms of emotional things because you never really had the space to explore that stuff. So you have to find other avenues to explore it because your immediate way of dealing with something is just adapt to whatever the new situation is. And it's a wonderful skill. It can also be a burden sometimes because it kind of separates you from other people, um, because you have a different way of processing things emotionally because of the way that what you've experienced and the trauma and the inconsistency. But it's also wonderful. Like, to really rely on yourself, you do have to learn to trust yourself in every different environment. Like, you might not trust the environment, but like, I'm never scared. I get scared that things might happen to other people, but I'm never really scared for myself because I trust myself.
Girl, can you see the back of my chair?
I can. Your cat is freaking out. She's like, "What is this thing that's happening outside? Are we gonna die? Is there gonna be a flood?"
God. I
It's great.
she is a part of the podcast. Uh,
That cat needs a thunder vest.
fuck you, Thunder. You know the Thunder Buddies. Anyway,
Cute.
let's not get off track. But what I wanted to go back on was you mentioning about like learning new skills, and funny enough, I
Mhm.
had skills that I had to learn. Um, like safe sex. I had no idea what safe sex was. Okay, and that kind of like what?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I was 17 years old and I had no idea what safe sex was. Didn't even know what gonorrhea was.
Yeah, I mean, that happens. You know what rumspringa is? Rumspringa is. I know the cat. She's so great. I see her. She's like, I don't know if I can trust the ground. I don't know if it's wet. I don't know if there's something going on outside. What's happening? My world is falling apart.
Oh
Um,
my god.
But like, okay, so the Amish go on Rumspringa when they're like of age, and they go out and
Oh,
they
I've
like
heard of
for the first
this.
time they're exposed to the outside world. Yes, it's a year where they decide to do everything. Usually, it's sex and meth, and they're able to, and like drinking and partying a lot, and they're able to, and ecstasy, not just meth. I shouldn't just limit it, but like it's just they go out and they
And
binge on everything
heroin.
that
Come
they
on,
have been.
you gotta
Yeah,
throw
well, no, I
heroin
mean,
into this.
it's I think it's more uppers, honestly. It's like
Oh,
party drugs. And like
oh,
so like they just party for the first time in their lives because they have freedom and they have nobody telling them not to. And in that year they have to decide if they want to go back to being Amish or if they want to like, live in the tainted outside world, outside of their world. And then they have no more ties to their family and stuff. Anyway, that's a whole different thing. It's a very interesting thing that if you look into it, but that happens so much with people who grow up in places like Amish or like any sort of religious cult where you just don't have any exposure to safe sex or what sex is or how pregnancy happens or how STDs happen. And it's like you get exposed, and then these kids come down with these crazy things because no one's ever taught them about that stuff. Like, because they've literally been taught that it's sinful. It's something that they should never do. And so like it entirely makes sense that you were not exposed to anything that would have
it's the
allowed you to know what
most.
these things were.
I'll tell you this right
It's
now. I like
it's a travesty.
like imagine like Judaism doing this, where you have a year that you just take off from Judaism. I'll be very honest with you. If people did that, I guarantee you they'd lose a lot of followers. They'd lose a lot.
Probably, yeah.
They'd probably lose a lot of followers. It just baffles me, like
Most
you.
religions would, I think.
But look at the Amish to me. They're like, fuck it, yeah, go out for a year, yeah, go ahead, and that's
Yeah.
crazy. That's crazy to have that. I mean, they're lucky, maybe. I don't know.
Well, that's the thing. It's like when you're raised in an environment where you don't have any idea what the rest of the world is like, and all you're told your entire life is that it's bad. Like when you actually see it and you see that it can actually be really beautiful, it would you want to go back? You know, like You can still have faith, like, and that, I don't know, faith is something that's internal. It's something that's individual. It doesn't, to me, this is what I believe at. Like, what you believe is just between you and the universe, or whatever your thing that you believe is. You can bring other people into it if you want, but never without consent. You can tell people about it, but not, I don't think you should proselytize. You shouldn't force it on anybody else. But at the end of the day, like, whether or not you're at a church or at a synagogue or at a mosque, or in the woods, or at a weird abandoned building, photographing it at late at night, like, whatever you find God in, that is your spirituality, that is your spiritual practice. And I don't think that you need to be under like a religious structure to get there.
I think today most people, we create our own religions. Um, I think we're at a point where the my personal view, people find this strange. I will respect somebody. I will respect somebody for being. I know it sounds like gunfire.
It's like something's coming, it's coming to get you, like Pumpkinhead or something. As you're talking about like religion, and then there's like thunder and lightning.
Yeah, it's like Jesus be like, Dave, you better not be talking. You better not be talking about
Exactly.
the Lord's truest possessions.
The wrath of whatever your spiritual deity is.
But what I'm trying to say is, like, these customs that are old and
yes,
in many ways very, very outdated. And people are starting to realize, like, we said this before, just like Freddie Mercury had no problem getting up stage in 1978, just wearing his undies, just stripping down to his undies. And you have a person like David Bowie that's just getting up there on the stage, dressed like a freaking, non-binary alien.
Yeah.
And then you have the Dolls, these really hot men in the 70s, looking like freaking girls at their concert. And you know what you say to yourself? That is the definition of self-dependency, where you're seeing somebody that's being the truest version of themselves. I mean, like, what other reason would they have to
and
do that?
Yeah. Well, and you're seeing, you're like, nothing that I come from resonates with me. I need to find that resonance elsewhere. And then you see somebody expressing it on stage or whatever, like, and you're like, oh my God, this is the thing that I've been looking for. And it might not be that particular artist or whatever, because, many artists that were groundbreaking artists end up coming out as problematic, or, it's real, they did bad shit later. But like, but so it's not that person, but it's what that person represents. It's that freedom that they were able to tap into, the freedom, the madness, the self-exploration, and just the trust that you can let your mind go off its leash and it's going to come back to you.
Yeah. It's like that little chihuahua that doesn't get off your, off your shoes. Like,
yeah, like how I don't trust my rats when I take them outside. I love them to death, but I would not trust them off leash outside.
Are you planning something?
They're just like, oh, what's the... Oh, we take them outside. We take them on little adventures. We took Mush Mush, the oldest rat, to the farmer's market, and we took a video of like this wonderful one of the like this person who had like this one of the booths, and she sprayed down the rat. And it's funny because that got like the most likes on a reel that I've ever gotten. It's gotten almost 5,000, or like almost like 5,000, and I'm just like, this is crazy. Or like views or whatever, like not likes, but like views, or like people watched it. And I was like, this is nuts. Why do people just love watching rats do shit? But like, we take them out, but like, I wouldn't put them down. You want that chihuahua to come back to you, but like, you put a rat down, they might be like, oh yes, the city that I come from, the streets, I understand, I remember what I am. And then you're never gonna see your rats again. Or some bigger predatory animal's gonna grab them and be like, oh, this is a plump little snack, I'm gonna eat this thing. Yeah, and be like, no, come back here.
I mean, it's kind of like that weird thing, especially for me. Like, I live paycheck to paycheck, and
yeah,
I have a pet, And like the one thing is like I don't understand if you're paycheck to paycheck, like how the hell are you supposed to afford to take care of an animal? And I'm like, listen, honey, I've got this little fluff ball for about 4 years, and she's got me through heavy shit. Okay,
Yeah,
and it's kind of interesting. Remember we said earlier about self dependency, about how it's good to have people that we can help others, and then have this environment of we're working together. We're there for each other. Having animals, I feel like, expands that even more because here you have
totally.
like she's terrified of the storm right now, and I'm talking right now as we're speaking, and I'm being like a parent, and I'm holding her, and like I'm serious, like this
Yes.
is what I'm doing right now, and
Grab one of my rats.
and you
I'm
just like
listening.
you just realize how important it is to be a part of this world. Oh my god, he's so fat. He's
He's so fat. This is
so
Mr. Moon Pie.
fat.
He's so fat. He's just like a little, he's a blimp.
But I feel like I
But
feel like I feel like pets are a really an important part of self dependency. I think like that's also like it's a way of also giving back. The earth is changing just like it has done for millions of years. But it's the steps that we're gonna do to take care of this earth. And again,
yes,
like all this comes back to is caring, protecting, being a part. These are all individual tasks. These are things that we all have to do on a day-to-day basis. We can't live in space. Like
no.
can't do that.
Well, and I also think with animals, it's even more of like a service of humility too, because like with people, you can talk to them and they can tell you what's going on inside their heads or what they're feeling when they need something. With animals, you really have to like tune into them because they are little energetic beings. They don't have words. Even if they understand you and communicate with you, you have to learn each one's like ins and outs to really be a good pet parent to it, like it's caregiver. But I also, yeah, as somebody who is paycheck to paycheck most of my life and still am when the seasons are slow out here. I mean, sometimes I'm making bank and sometimes I'm like, well, I hope I can make on my bills this month. It's just the wonders of being a freelance artist person. But like so I totally understand it. And I think I honestly have a different perspective on pets than a lot of people do. And it's just like, are you bettering this animal's life by being in it? Yes.
Yes.
If the answer is yes, then keep this animal. Like if like you will figure it out. You can ask, you can figure it out, you can find a way to take care of them if they're sick. But the thing is like I think that there's if you're a responsible person and you know how to feed an animal right and treat it right and notice when something is off with it, like I don't think you have to have a ton of money to have a pet. I think you just have to be like a receptive person to little creatures, to like the needs of a little creature.
Well,
And like you are
yeah.
benefiting it and it's benefiting you. Like all three of these rats that I have, these are like our little furry babies. Like we love them. They are some of the bright spots of my life and of Saturn's life as well. We literally will just like hang out on like a weekend morning, just like watching the rats and joking with them and making fun of them and picking them up. And they're like a constant thing, constant source of interest for both of us in our lives. And these are all three of them would have been snake food if I hadn't adopted them. Like I do take them to the vets when they're sick and stuff because I am, knock on wood, I am lucky and grateful enough to have, a bit of financial stability at this point in my life. But like I didn't for a long time. And I'm able to take them to the vet when they're sick and stuff. But it's like, but I also have to think about like if I had not taken them, they would literally be dead. They would all be bought as snake food. They're not animals that are generally, unless you go to like a fancy expensive rat breeder, like you're not going to get rats are mostly just bred to be meals for larger carnivorous animals.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of relate. I mean, Twixie, the cat that's been running around here because of the lightning. Um, she was found by a friend of mine. I've said this before. When she was walking home back from college, and I took her in having another pet, and that cat I no longer have, but she basically chose me, and I kind of got the sense that she didn't have a mother, and she was abandoned at a very, very young age,
Yeah.
and she just wanted something like a companion. She just wanted something to,
Yeah.
like, care for her. So that's what I've been doing for the past 4 years, and it's hard. It's hard, She's an anxious cat. She gets crazy, but that's the thing is like we're saying about like being a pet parent is you realize. I think it also makes you a better person, especially how you relate with other people, because the pets teach you different ways of compassion and kindness.
Yes,
And
and how to love without getting the, how to love kind of unconditionally too.
yeah, I mean they can't really like kiss you, good night. I mean some of them do, but
Yeah.
they can't give you the same love a human can, but they can give you a love, like you said, that's unconditional. Like,
Yeah, they're these weird little things that have decided to trust you. And you've earned their trust because you've treated them well. And they're just these little wild things that are like, I trust you. I like you. I'm gonna hang out with you and I'm not gonna bite you and I'm gonna sit and clap and I'm gonna pet you and I'm gonna like lick you and wag my little rat tail. It's great. Like, but they
it
do,
is
some of
it,
them
it
wag their
is really
tails. But like,
it's wonderful.
yeah,
It really is wonderful.
it is. Yes, having pets is one of the best experiences in the world.
I think also like we've been talking a lot about self reliance. I think also one thing we were touching about earlier was self awareness, and I think for especially for the both of us, I'm very aware of my situation. I mean, I freaking made really big life choices. Um, Being aware is so important because to be dependent, you gotta understand. Okay, so if you wanna live here, you are aware of that. You're gonna have to be making this and this amount, and to do this and this and this, and drive here and there. You have to be aware of your situation.
Yeah, totally, totally. And and that I think comes back to like, you know, so something I talk to people a lot about, like, because I feel like I've lived a pretty wild life and I've been pretty public about it on social media and like, and I don't mean like crazy party, but I've just done a lot of crazy shit and like I've done a lot of things like on different realms of crazy shit, like personally, politically, travel, like just extremes of
Can I?
things.
I
And
do. I'll tell you this.
yeah,
I've done this with a few people, where I take 3 songs to describe the person, and
yes,
there's 3 songs that come to mind when I think of you.
what are
First
they?
one is "Taking a Walk on the Wall Side" by Lou Reed.
Like Lou
Uh,
Reed.
"Life on Mars" by David Bowie, and this may sound weird. Um, I don't think it's. I think it's "Days or Haze" by Led Zeppelin. I think it's "Days or Haze." It's a really cool song. But those are 3 songs that if anybody wants to understand like Eli's like perception, I think those would like be two very. I feel like music kind of allows also people to have another layer. That's important too.
Yes,
It's like our self identity in many ways is we
it's
relate
true.
we relate to things. Again.
Especially, and I was in a band that was like locally popular, and we toured a little bit and stuff in Chicago when I lived there, and I was in it for 12 years. And it's funny, I went back there. Saturday and I went back there this last time, and one of the old bandmates was getting married, and I realized just how much of my identity is still tied to the Fuzzy Bunnies of Death. Like music in terms of what you identify with, but also if you ever made music and if you ever were in a band or like a solo artist or whatever, like, and you or DJ and like you created situations where people bonded or people found, opened up or found certain parts of themselves or felt free or felt there was a catharsis or whatever. Like that's also a thing too, is just like the way that that kind of continues through your life. And like you might not have been doing it for like our band, we played our last show, and not because we didn't love it, we loved it, it's just everybody moved, because we've been doing it since I was 16 when we started. We've been doing it since we were like literally teenagers. And like, we just were like over it. We were almost 30 at that time, and we haven't played a show since I was like 28. But like, it's still something that I think of every day. And I think of like that space that we created for people to just go nuts and explore themselves.
Yeah. I mean, we don't live in the days of Andy Warhol anymore, but there are many more Andy Warhols than there was 50, 60 years ago. And I say the same thing where, we don't have the hippie movement anymore, but we have better version of hippies today, just kind of in all of us. I think over time we kind of go through like the twilight zone of these different doors that we open up with different keys. And we don't realize of what kind of people we become because we take those different pieces and we make the person who we are. And then we relate to the past, but then we don't realize what we have now. We have way more of it than we had 20, 30, 50, 60, 70 years ago.
Yeah, 100,000%. I think I love seeing what younger generations are creating. I don't think I will ever feel like, oh, kids these days. I love seeing what kids these days are doing. It makes me so happy. I can't wait to see what the next generations are doing. Like, I think that those big iconic people that like made a big impacts in our lives, and like you and I have slightly different musical inclinations, but we have like, but I think we can agree on a lot of the same ones. And like, those ones, people, you can't replicate that because certain things just literally changed society. Like Saturn and I got to see the David Bowie documentary, Moon Age Daydream last night, and our dear friend was actually the first assistant editor on the film, and so we all had a group of like 35 people last night, and we all went out to see it, and it was fantastic, and it was beautiful, but it was also like go see it. Everyone should go see it. It's great.
I saw
Also,
it
our friend
today.
edited it. Like,
it was
yeah.
amazing. But any stoners that
But
are listening, you should definitely watch this high. But yes, go on.
yeah, we had our not weed, but we had our own fun things.
Yeah, you need it. You can't watch this thing sober.
Yeah, we had our little squirt bottle of ketamine. But like it was great. That's our jam. But like, so we went to go see it, and like it was, the thing is like he was the first person to open that entire universe to a lot of people. Not to say that it didn't exist before, but no one had ever been in that right place at the right time to create that kind of movement and ripple through society and then continually do it because he kept
But do
going
you
in to
know?
find new things about himself and as an artist.
But do you know who inspired David Bowie? The Velvet
His
Underground.
brother, his brother.
The Velvet Underground.
Yeah,
It's
but
his brother also. But what I'm trying to say is like you're mentioning with generations from generations.
yeah,
We a lot of the times take from the past, we bring back, and we make it better. Or and sometimes we take something that we've
yeah.
seen, we get inspired, and then we show it to the world.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like, think of, okay, here's a good, like, think of the Bauhaus art movement and architecture movement, and then think of the band Bauhaus that was one of the first official goth bands creating music with like, weird costumes, and like it referenced so many other things and called itself Bauhaus after the Bauhaus art movement. Like you have things, everything is sort of a meta reference to everything else. And I mean, and that's kind of the beauty of art, is that that's the beauty of art and just of generational and cultural exchange, is like nothing is ever completely new because
No,
it's all just us sharing back and forth forever.
but it's the
But I mean,
way.
some things, but then,
But
yeah,
it's the way. You're right, but it's the way and the direction, right? Isn't that the most
yeah,
important?
yeah, it's how it changes the world around it. It's the waves that it sets into motion that ripple through eternity. That's what is different from some artists versus other artists, is that some have that resonance and you hear it forever and some don't. And who's to say why some things stick with some people, with people, and others don't as much? But I think that all of them have a place, in cultural history, as long as they're not trying to just imitate.
No,
As long as they're, yeah. Well, something
no.
that I loved so much in that documentary, and this is going back to the, well, this kind of goes back to a little bit to our topic, was David Bowie feeling like he had just kind of be, like feeling like he was creating a character, and just like I was really interested in, I didn't know as much about his art. Like I loved all the performance art pieces and installations and like paintings and stuff that they were showing. And it's interesting because he lived in West Berlin, like I think before like the wall fell, and then like chose to live in like Thailand and India and like other part in like just other parts of the world and stuff, and like just travel and learn all these different things about people because he just felt like he had to keep, like, and I feel the same way. This is why I've traveled and done so much shit, where it's like you have to have new information to figure out at the core what you're creating and why, like, and or not even why, but just like to create something new, something that is the new thing that you're pushing out. You're not replicating or imitating yourself. You're constantly growing and trying to change and trying to seek out experiences that you're able to adapt to or from.
That's what I was saying also yesterday was Freddie Mercury, which is another great example, which was kind of at the same point as David Bowie. Freddie Mercury also had the no shits attitude where he loved learning and exploring, and he constantly was changing the way he sang and how he put things together and how they performed. And just like David Bowie, like all these, they were very hard to work with. You ask anyone that worked with David Bowie or Freddie Mercury, they're very difficult people to work with.
Oh yeah.
And like you're saying, these are people that have so much information in their head, and it's like it's spilling out of them as if like they're drowning in the sea. And you try to like talk to them and get them to like say what they're trying to say, but they're just blurting, and you're just like, what are you fucking trying to tell me?
Yeah. That's the sort of, but I think that's not just artist. That's a particular kind of artist. It's sort of a little bit of the diva artist. And
Yes.
like a lot of the times that's the front person. Like I feel like most people who are front people uh have that naturally, or allow themselves to go there, where they are kind of like these, like, you know, divas. And or like they're these people who kind of like, they're difficult to work with because it's like they're not just creating the art, they're creating the spectacle of the art as well. So it's like they're like, you have a lot of like pop stars who are perhaps the performer and the singer, but at the end of the day, they have an entire team writing their work and teaching them choreographed dance moves, and a whole marketing team that's deciding what their entire,
That's pretty
the
much
entire
you're
concert is. But then with David Bowie, what
you're
with
pretty.
Bowie, you had just like what?
No, I was gonna say was you're pretty much describing pretty much all of artists that we have now, pretty famous. Not the underground. There's a lot of really great underground artists today, but there's a lot of artists today that they don't they don't do anything. They just hire a team to do everything for them.
Yeah, yeah. You have some that still do a lot of it. I mean, you have some. You have a few.
Not many.
Yeah. Well, a lot of underground ones. And I think after a while people will get tired of that, especially with like social media being the main way of seeing new stuff rather than marketing. Like people are marketing themselves. It's not the same as it used to be, where you had to like have a a thing. But like, or have an agent thing. I have an agent or whatever. Like, you don't have to have a team or an agent. You just have to put your stuff out there and figure out how to get it out there. And I think it's a lot more, there's much more of a um, uh, self-dependent media marketing these days because of the influx of social media, especially TikTok.
Nice
TikTok
touch with
is
self.
nuts. Every time yeah.
Nice
What?
touch. Nice touch with self-independent.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, how do we circle this back? No, but it is though, really. Like TikTok is this crazy thing, and like I make content on there, but like I don't have that many. I have a small little handful of people that follow me, but like just small, but like 500 something. But like people have thousands, millions, and a lot of that is self-made. I'm sure there's strategies and everything to it to get to that
Yeah,
point,
but
but it's like a
numbers
lot of that is
don't.
self-made. And every time you see a hashtag, it goes billions. You have billions of people seeing things a day, and that's insane. And that gives so much opportunity to see new content, to see these new emerging things where people are doing everything themselves. And I think that's really wonderful. Like, you don't have to have the money. You just need an or you just need a phone. All you need is a phone to be able to, you know, make yourself into make yourself seen now. It's great.
Yeah, but I don't think it's also like the numbers. I think that's also uh, something that's important. We're not always needing a large crowd means that you're making a change. Sometimes the little things, the people. You know what? I was reading an article about this, which is so true. Which is where you'd rather have people that are interested in this. I personally, with this podcast as well, I would prefer to have a small group of people that genuinely care about these conversations than have thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people that just don't care. They're just, I don't know, whatever, fucking clickbait or whatever that
Yeah, but
shit is.
ideally, wouldn't you like to have both? I want to have both.
I want to have both,
As an artist, I want to have both.
but what I care about more is that group of people. Remember, that was the whole thing about David Bowie was same thing with Freddie Mercury as well. Prince, same thing. Michael Jackson, same thing. The crowd, they're fans, not audience. They're fans.
Yeah.
Made the music. Like there were many of their songs where they would just get on stage and everybody was just singing their songs.
But I think it's about what you're trying to, I also think it's about what you're doing it,
Of
why you're
course, yeah,
doing it,
yeah.
I guess. Like if you want your stuff to have some sort of effect on people, the goal would be to have it touch more people. And to touch people personally. Like I don't think the choice has to be small and intense appreciation or vast and not intense appreciation. Sometimes you see something and you're just like, wow, this piece of work is just absolutely brilliant
Can you
regardless. It might be loved by millions of
give
people,
me
but it also might be, huh.
give me 1 minute. I'm gonna go put her down. I'm not gonna put her down and kill her. I mean, put her down, like put her on a blanket so she can tuck herself in. Uh, I'll be right back.
Cute. Cool. Are we still we're still recording, I guess. Well, I'm just going to talk about I guess I'm going to just talk about rats and art. So I'm just going to plug my own pop-up mobile installation called Rat Palace USA. It combines my two favorite things, rats and art, which are also palindromes of one another. Or, not palindromes, what am I saying? Anagrams of one another. I'm tired. Yeah, it's all about taking people through inner psycho-emotional journeys, but using these sort of like uh, poppy psychedelic art rats to do so. They're offering boxes that people interact with, and it's all about guiding people through personal journeys through these little cartoon rats.
Hmm.
Hi, I was just plugging my Rat Palace installation. The confluence of my two favorite things, my immersive art installation and rats.
We were talking about with the audience
Yes. That's why I did that, because it goes directly in line with what I'm trying to do with as an artist, which is like help guide people through different experiences, like on a psycho-emotional level with the work that I create. And so, yes, so of course I want it to touch people on an individual level. So if I have a small group of people, it's not fans, it's not like a rock star. I'm not a rock star, like, but it's like, it's not that kind of a thing where you're seeing people are seeing you come perform. But for me, it's like, I want people to interact with and participate in my immersive experience that I create. I've taken this pop up to like 9 different things at this point, and people do everywhere I go. People react to it and they interact with it, and they do the thing that I've set up for them to do. And a lot of people get emotional and they take things out of it, because that's the whole point of it. It's getting you to ask questions that you wouldn't necessarily ask yourself, and then like interact and see where other people are because of those things. So, is the goal to like get everybody to experience it? No, but I definitely want it to have a broader, a broader reach to some degree, because I think that the more people are asking themselves those questions in this strange and safe and surreal container that I've created for them, the more people are engaging in these conversations about their, internal growth and development, who they are as people.
I want to leave off with this and say, for me, for me, self-dependency has always been a message, and the message is you don't have to live in a rut. You don't have to live and stay comfortable to be able to be the truest person of yourself. But remembering the choices that we make, we have to accept the consequences to our actions, even though that there's a positive. So always remembering that to make a positive, you need a negative, and with every negative, there's always a positive. That's it. That's what I'm leaving off with.
That's cool.
Yeah. Anything else you wanted to throw into the bone bag?
Trust yourself to do the thing that you're scared of. And the more that you do and you are able to do and that you didn't think that you could do, maybe, the more you will be able to rely on yourself and see what you are made of, and the less frightening the world will seem.
Yeah. Well, that's been Peace of Mind from Lost in the Groove. So stay tuned, and remember, we've had fun. It's been great, and we got lost in the groove. All right, everybody. See you next week. Peace.